picture this, right? You are standing in a crowded room.
Yeah, like an open plan office.
Exactly, like an office on a Tuesday afternoon. The fluorescent lights are buzzing overhead, people are, pinging each other on Slack, and the coffee machine is whirring in the background.
Or maybe a family gathering.
Right, a family gathering during the holidays, or a bustling dinner party where everyone just seems to be laughing at the exact right moments.
Doing the whole social dance.
Yeah, the dance. You have a drink in your hand, you're nodding along to the conversation, and you are, well, you're hitting all your social cues perfectly.
Smiling when you're supposed to smile.
Asking the right follow-up questions about, like, someone's recent vacation to Italy, and yet right there in the middle of all those people, you feel this pervasive, low-grade hum of total alienation.
A feeling of just total disconnection.
Yeah, you feel like an absolute ghost.
It's a remarkably universal experience, yet it remains one of those things we rarely discuss out loud.
Because it's uncomfortable.
Extremely uncomfortable. People carry this profound sense of disconnection, this abrasive friction they feel deep in their bones, even when they are supposedly doing everything correctly.
You play the part.
Right. You play the part, you wear the uniform, but internally there's a gaping chasm between you and the room.
And the immediate, knee-jerk reaction we all seem to have to that feeling is immense guilt. We immediately turn inward.
What's wrong with me?
Exactly. We think, what is wrong with me? Why can't I just be normal? Why can't I just enjoy the small talk about the weather or the quarterly earnings report like everyone else?
We pathologize it.
We really do. We treat that sense of alienation like a personal defect. We view it as a failure on our part to adapt to the room. But today, in this deep dive, we're taking a stack of research spanning from neurobiology and evolutionary anthropology all the way to ancient philosophy to figure out why we actually feel this way.
And it's a fascinating cross-section of data.
It is. And more importantly, we are going to explore why trying to, fix this feeling or desperately force ourselves to fit in might actually be the exact wrong move.
It could be the worst thing you could do.
Right. So we are looking at a radical reframe today. What if this persistent sense of being an outsider isn't a failure at all, but a vital, necessary spiritual redirection?
The stakes here are genuinely fascinating, because to truly grasp what's happening when you feel like a ghost at that dinner party, we have to look at the internal conflict that's literally tearing you apart in that moment.
A clash of systems.
Exactly. What the research reveals is a profound, almost violent collision between your biology and your psychology. Your ego and your nervous system completely panic at isolation because they associate it with literal death.
Right.
Meanwhile, your soul, or your deeper authentic self, actually requires a degree of that exact same isolation to find what ancient traditions call your dharmic community.
Okay, let's unpack the hardware we are running on first. Because if we really want to understand this conflict, we have to start at the biological roots.
The savannah.
Yeah, take us back to the savannah. Why does feeling left out of a conversation at the water cooler feel like such an existential threat to our physical bodies?
Well, because to your ancient neurobiology, it literally is an existential threat. If we rewind the clock to early human history, the tribe was the absolute non-negotiable guarantor of your survival.
Because we aren't exactly apex predators on our own.
Far from it. Humans do not have thick hides. We don't have venom. We aren't particularly fast. Our evolutionary advantage was entirely our ability to cooperate.
So if you're out, you're out.
If you were expelled from the group, you didn't just feel a little sad or lonely, you starved to death, or you were eaten by a predator. There was no independent survival on the savannah.
Wow.
So the amygdala, which operates as the brain's primary threat detection center, evolved to treat social exclusion with the exact same physiological panic that it reserves for a charging predator.
It's like we are running modern software on ancient, terrified hardware.
That is a very apt way to describe it, and we can actually see this happening in real time in the lab.
Wait, really? How?
Yeah, when neuroscientists put subjects into functional MRI machines and simulate social rejection, and we're talking about even something as trivial as being left out of a digital game of catch.
Like a video game.
Literally a basic digital game of catch. The imaging results are staggering. There is a region in the brain called the anterior cingulate cortex. Its primary job is to process acute physical pain.
Okay.
If you break your leg or slam your hand in a car door, this is the area that lights up to scream, you are injured, do something about it.
Right.
The neuroimaging shows that when a person experiences social rejection or prolonged isolation, that exact same brain region activates.
Wait. I want to make sure I'm grasping the magnitude of this. The brain doesn't distinguish between a broken bone and being ostracized by your peer group.
Neurologically speaking, no. Pain is pain. To your brain, a missed party invite or a cold shoulder from a colleague is processed as a physical wound.
That is insane.
It really reframes everything, doesn't it? The emotional ache of feeling like an outsider isn't just a poetic metaphor. It is a physiological, neurological event.
This explains why when you feel socially alienated, you often feel physically exhausted, achy, and depleted.
Exactly. Your nervous system is mounting a massive fight or flight response. Your heart rate might elevate slightly, your muscles tense up, your digestion slows down.
Your body genuinely believes you are about to die in the wilderness because the tribe has turned its back on you.
Yes.
Man, this explains so much about the baseline anxiety of modern life. When we fall out of step with cultural norms, or, we don't meet corporate expectations, our body reacts as if a saber-toothed tiger just walked into the break room.
It's a full-blown alarm.
But I have to push back here, or at least ask for a deeper explanation on this.
Sure, go ahead.
If this is just an evolutionary misfire, if it's just our ancient hardware overreacting because we live in safe houses now and we don't need a tribe to hunt our food, why is the modern epidemic of loneliness so uniquely devastating right now?
That's the real paradox, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
if we outgrew the savannah, why does the loneliness feel worse today than it did 50 or 100 years ago?
That is the critical question, and the sources point to two major aggravating factors that make this uniquely modern and uniquely devastating. First, we have to look at the mechanics of our cognitive limits, specifically Robin Dunbar's anthropological research.
Oh, the Dunbar number.
Right. Dunbar proposed what we now call the Dunbar number. He looked at the neocortical volume of primate brains. That's the outer layer of the brain responsible for higher-level thought and complex social processing.
Okay, so the social hard drive, basically.
Yes. By mapping brain size to group size, he determined that human brains evolved to maintain stable social relationships with a maximum of about 150 individuals.
So roughly the size of a typical ancestral village.
Precisely. That is the absolute limit of our processing power. Maintaining a relationship isn't just knowing someone's name. It requires immense computational power to track social dynamics.
Like keeping the roster straight.
Yeah. Who is mad at who owes who a favor, who is trustworthy, who is currently allied with whom. Your brain can only keep track of that web for about 150 people.
But today, if you open any social media app, you are exposed to thousands of people before you've even finished your morning coffee.
And that is exactly where the architecture of our modern world turns against our biology. Modern hyperconnectivity exposes us to thousands of curated lives, opinions, and social circles every single day.
We're flooding this system.
We're drowning it. This artificially inflates our sense of exclusion. Your brain sees 1,000 people having a party on Instagram or LinkedIn that you weren't invited to, and it triggers that interior cingulate cortex.
Oh, wow. Because your ancient hardware doesn't understand that these people live thousands of miles away and you don't actually know them.
Exactly. It just registers, I am not part of this group, I am being left behind. We are constantly comparing our messy day-to-day reality to the global highlight reels of absolute strangers.
Tricking our ancient hardware into feeling universally rejected on a massive scale.
Universally and constantly rejected.
Okay, so our brains are completely overloaded, registering thousands of micro-rejections daily. What is the second aggravating factor making this so devastating right now?
The sheer compounding physical toll of that chronic false alarm. According to landmark public health studies, and this includes extensive data from the U.S. Surgeon General's office, chronic isolation and a lack of authentic community carry health consequences equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wait, 15 cigarettes just from being lonely?
Just from the chronic isolation. And the mechanism behind this is entirely rooted in that fight-or-flight response we discussed earlier. When your brain registers social exclusion, it releases stress hormones, primarily cortisol.
And cortisol is designed for short-term bursts, right? Like run from the tiger for 5 minutes, energy.
Yes, exactly. It floods your body with glucose for quick energy. It suppresses your immune system, so energy isn't wasted on fighting a cold while you are running for your life, and it increases your heart rate.
All good things if you're actually running.
Right. But when you are chronically lonely, when you constantly feel like an outsider at work or in your social circles, that cortisol drip never turns off.
You're just constantly marinating in it.
You are marinating your internal organs in stress hormones meant for brief emergencies. Over time, this constant chemical bath physically degrades cellular tissue. It leads to systemic inflammation, elevated blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, and a severely compromised immune system.
So it's quite literally a public health crisis masquerading as a personal social failing.
Exactly. It's a physiological breakdown.
So to synthesize this for a moment, for anyone listening, if you are sitting there feeling physically drained by the social environments you're navigating, if you come home from that office or that family gathering and just need to lie on the floor in a dark room, it's not all in your head.
It's in your body.
Right. Your biology is screaming at you to conform so you can survive. But the environment you are trying to conform to is completely unnatural to your brain's capacity.
Your body is actively trying to save you through conformity, but the mechanism is fundamentally broken in the modern context.
But if our biology is demanding that we blend in and punishing us with physical pain when we don't, there must be a massive psychological war happening inside us when we actually try to grow or change or, differentiate ourselves.
It's a war on two fronts.
Which brings us to the core tug of war in this whole deep dive, the battle between the ego and the soul. Let's break down the competing agendas here.
This is where we cross the bridge from evolutionary biology into psychology and ancient philosophy. The human psyche is essentially split between two contrasting agendas. The ego, which is heavily tied to that survival mechanism we just detailed, craves safety above all else.
It just wants to survive.
Right. It wants predictability, it wants control, and above all, it demands uniform acceptance from the herd.
The ego wants the external metrics. It wants the promotion. It wants the likes on a post. It wants the polite dinner party invitations.
Validation, essentially.
Yeah, validation. It wants to look around the room, read the social cues, and say, okay, nobody is mad at me. I am safe. I am an insider. I am not getting eaten by the tiger today.
Exactly. The ego's primary strategy is to blend seamlessly into the background to avoid the sharp edges of rejection. It will happily sacrifice your authenticity if it guarantees your safety.
Which is such a wild trade-off when you think about it.
It is, but to the ego, it's a no-brainer. But then you have the soul, or the deeper, authentic self, the core essence of your identity, depending on your preferred terminology. And the soul operates on an entirely different frequency.
It doesn't care about the tiger.
The soul doesn't care about safety in the same way at all. It seeks truth, it seeks psychological integration, and it demands the expression of its deep internal purpose.
And when those two agendas clash, when the ego demands safety and the soul demands truth, what happens to the individual? What does that actually feel like on a Tuesday afternoon?
What occurs is what the texts describe as a soul-level sickness.
That sounds heavy.
It is. When you continuously suppress your authentic voice, when you constantly bite your tongue to satisfy the ego's demand to fit in, you don't just feel a little sad. You experience a pervasive numbness, a quiet, creeping despair.
Like you're hollowed out.
Yes. You might be surrounded by friends, your calendar might be completely full, but you feel utterly hollow.
I think we've all been there. It reminds me of those moments where you find yourself pretending to care deeply about a coworker's golf game or laughing at jokes you don't find funny just to avoid sitting alone in the cafeteria.
The micro-betrayals of the self.
Yes, exactly. You do it for safety, but the cost is this quiet internal death because you aren't actually there.
Yeah.
You've sent a representative in your place.
A very well-behaved representative.
Right. You've sent this curated, highly edited, safe version of yourself to the party, so of course you feel lonely you didn't even go.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. You are entirely absent from your own life. And this points to the radical reframe we mentioned at the start of our deep dive. That profound feeling of being an outsider, that intense friction.
Yeah.
That isn't your social skills failing. That is the soul's alarm system disrupting the ego's complacency.
Oh, wow.
It is an internal, visceral refusal to continue playing a role that no longer fits you. The alienation is actually a healthy immune response to an inauthentic environment.
It's the friction of differentiation. But I want to circle back to a concept you mentioned briefly earlier because the sources dedicate significant time to it. Dharma.
Yes,
Because
darn.
in modern spirituality, we hear the word dharma, and we immediately picture,
Yeah.
I don't know, quitting your corporate job to become a freelance travel blogger in Bali.
Yoga retreats and green juice.
Exactly. We treat it as this highly individualistic self-actualization destiny. But the sources provide some context here that totally flips that modern interpretation on its head. Can you explain where this concept actually comes from?
Yes, the modern interpretation of Dharma is highly westernized, romanticized, and hyper-individualistic. It's been packaged as a journey to, you know, find your bliss.
The ultimate self-health cliche.
Right. But if we look at its ancient Vedic roots, originating in India thousands of years ago, Dharma was incredibly practical and deeply rooted in community. It was not about retreating into self-actualization or abandoning society.
So what was it then?
Dharma referred to a precise, stabilizing structural duty within a cosmic and social order.
Meaning your purpose was inherently tied to holding the community together. You weren't finding yourself just for the sake of yourself.
Exactly. Finding your dharmic purpose meant uncovering the specific, unique way that you were structurally required to serve the collective.
Give me an analogy here.
Think of it like an ecosystem. A tree's dharma is to provide oxygen and shade. A bee's dharma is to pollinate. They don't do this to self-actualize.
Right. They do it because the entire forest collapses if they don't.
Precisely. In the ancient view, your purpose was about profound integration into the whole, utilizing your unique gifts to sustain the village, not separating from it to sit on a mountaintop alone.
Okay, so if Dharma originally meant finding your specific structural role to serve the collective, how in the world did we arrive at this modern romantic archetype of the lone wolf?
It's quite a leap, isn't it?
It is. You know, the trope, the misunderstood outsider who is just too deep and brilliant for a mundane society to understand. Where did that cultural narrative actually come from?
We can trace that back to a very specific historical and intellectual pivot. The formal romanticization of the outsider didn't really emerge until the late 18th century, during the Romantic era. We see it championed by thinkers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who argued that society inherently corrupts the pure individual. And later, in the 20th century, it was heavily reinforced by existentialists like Albert Camus.
Right, the classic image of the guy sitting in a Parisian cafe, smoking a cigarette, wearing a black turtleneck, feeling intensely alienated from the universe, and viewing everyone else as, like, superficial.
Yes, the archetype of the brooding intellectual. But what's crucial to understand is that this intellectual shift didn't happen in a vacuum. It directly mapped onto a massive socioeconomic earthquake.
The Industrial Revolution.
Exactly. For thousands of years, humans lived in tight-knit, obligatory agrarian villages. In a village, everyone has a clear dharmic role. You are the baker, the blacksmith, the healer.
And you might not even like everyone in the village, but your role in keeping the village alive is undeniable. You belong because you are necessary.
You belong because the structure requires you. But then we build factories, and that entire structure shatters.
Because we move from those intimate villages into massive industrialized cities.
Suddenly, you were surrounded by thousands of strangers, working mechanically on assembly lines where you were entirely replaceable. You were no longer the village baker. You were a cog in a machine.
So individual alienation transformed from a rare occurrence into a universal baseline psychological condition for millions of people.
Yes, everyone felt it.
So because the Industrial Revolution made everyone feel incredibly isolated and replaceable, we took the pain of that disconnection and we intellectualized it. We made it cool and heroic to be an outsider because everyone suddenly felt like one. We basically threw a leather jacket on our loneliness.
That is exactly what happened. We romanticized the pain of disconnection to make it bearable. We turned the tragic consequence of industrialization into a badge of philosophical superiority.
Okay, theories and history are fascinating, but what does this tug of war between the ego's need for safety and the soul's need for truth actually look like in practice today?
We need to see it in action.
Right. I want to examine what happens when people actually listen to that soul-level alarm, rather than just numbing it with Netflix or forcing themselves to conform. And the sources provide two incredibly detailed narrative case studies that anchor this perfectly.
They are brilliant examples.
Let's look at the first one, the corporate exile. Walk us through this guy's situation.
This case study is a masterclass in the soul-level sickness we discussed earlier. The subject is a mid-career technologist. By every conceivable external metric, every metric the ego cares about, this guy is the ultimate insider.
He checks all the boxes.
All of them. He's climbed the traditional corporate ladder for 15 years. He holds a lucrative team leadership role. He manages complex enterprise systems. He has the corner office, the stock options, and he has the universal respect of the executive board.
So he won the game. He has all the badges of safety. His amygdala should be totally relaxed.
But internally, the text notes, he felt like an absolute ghost in his own life. The environment he was in required a specific type of performance.
The corporate tap dance.
Yes. The endless cycles of corporate politics, the superficial status games and endless meetings, the operational firefighting where everything is an urgent crisis but nothing actually matters.
That sounds exhausting just hearing about it.
It left him entirely depleted. And the physical manifestation of this misalignment was a heavy, visceral dread every single Monday morning. He would sit in his car in the parking garage, staring at the steering wheel, physically unable to make himself walk into the building.
Man, I think a massive portion of the people listening just felt a sharp ping of recognition with that Monday morning parking garage dread. Usually the world tells you, oh, you're just burnt out. Take a 2-week vacation to Hawaii, do some yoga, and get back to work.
Band-aids on a bullet wound.
Exactly. But he didn't do that. He realized a vacation wasn't going to fix a fundamental architectural flaw.
No, he didn't treat the symptom. He conducted an intentional internal audit. He stopped asking what was wrong with his work ethic and started asking what was wrong with his alignment.
And what did he find?
He realized, through deep reflection, that his soul was starving for deep creation, for genuine mentorship of younger engineers, for mindful reflection on complex problems.
But his environment, the rigid corporate architecture he was trapped inside, exclusively demanded administrative compliance, endless reporting, and, as you said, corporate choreography.
The classic round peg, square hole dilemma. His soul wants to build a beautiful clock, and his company wants him to fill out a spreadsheet about the clock.
So he makes the terrifying jump. He steps back from the frantic center of corporate validation. He gives it the title, the corner office, and he steps into the quiet margins. And the source notes that initially this transition was horrifying for him.
It had to be horrifying. The safety net of institutional belonging was gone. His amygdala was likely screaming at him that he had just committed social and financial suicide. He was alone in the wilderness. But in that quiet crucible of the margin, without the constant noise of corporate politics, he redirected his energy. He began building independent, creative, and professional outlets. He focused on deep technical mastery and mindful work, devoid of the corporate bureaucracy.
And here's the paradox, right? By embracing his status as an outsider to the traditional corporate mindset, by accepting the terrifying isolation, he actually unlocked a much deeper level of purpose.
He found his rhythm.
Yeah, he started sharing his authentic work online and consulting independently, and he built a community of peers who resonated with his actual values, not his formal title. He found his dharmic community by first being willing to endure the wilderness.
It's the perfect illustration of moving from a proximity-based community, the people who just happen to work in your building and share your coffee machine, to a resonance-based community, people who align with your deepest values.
He had to leave the center to find his true tribe on the periphery.
Exactly. But the second case study shows a completely different, equally common trap. This is the artist who mistook exile for failure.
Let's unpack her story, because I found this one devastatingly relatable. This is a lifelong creator, a woman who moved through multiple social circles, different industries, and creative collectives over a decade.
Always hovering.
Always hovering on the periphery of these groups, never quite breaking into the inner circle. And her coping mechanism for this alienation was total, exhausting assimilation.
The chameleon effect.
Yes. In her 20s, she twisted herself into knots trying to fit in. She would adopt the aesthetics, the clothing style, the behavioral norms, and even the political talking points of whatever group she happened to be standing in.
It's a classic trauma response orchestrated by the ego. It's the fawn response. The underlying logic is, if I mirror you perfectly, if I become exactly what you want me to be, you won't reject me and I will be safe.
But the psychological cost of that is staggering. The
Yeah.
text says she constantly felt like an imposter wearing borrowed clothes.
Borrowed clothes, yes.
Think about the sheer psychological exhaustion of having to perform a completely different identity every time you leave your house. You have to remember which version of yourself you are supposed to be for the theater kids versus the tech bros versus the political activists.
And the tragic irony is that because she was always wearing a mask, whenever she inevitably still felt alienated, because you can never truly connect through a mask, she internalized it as deep personal shame.
She blamed herself.
Completely. She diagnosed herself as socially inept. She genuinely believed her inability to sustain long-term belonging was a massive personal failure. She thought she was broken.
Until she met a mentor who delivered what I think is the most pivotal, paradigm-shifting quote in these entire sources.
It really is the anchor of the piece.
She was crying to this mentor about how she never fits in anywhere, and the mentor told her, "You keep feeling like an outsider because you were never designed to fit inside a box that someone else built."
That is the architectural shift we discussed at the very beginning. It is the realization that the friction isn't a bug, it is a feature.
So what happens when she actually applies this wisdom? She stops filtering her voice, she stops trying to appease the room, she stops wearing the borrowed clothes.
The result is a phenomenon the sources call broadcasting your true frequency.
I love that phrase.
When she stopped trying to assimilate, when she finally let her weird, authentic, sharp-edged self be seen, her unapologetic vulnerability became a beacon. She wasn't actively hunting for friends or networking in the traditional sense.
Right, she wasn't doing the awkward mixer events.
No. But by simply existing loudly in her truth, sharing her art without watering it down, speaking her actual opinions, she attracted a small, fiercely loyal cohort of collaborators.
People who appreciated her precisely for the things she used to hide. The weird quirks, the intense focus, the specific aesthetics, the very traits she thought were liabilities became the exact magnets that pulled in her true tribe.
Exactly.
Her years of exile weren't a failure. They were an incubation period she kept trying to escape.
And this is a vital lesson. When you mask your true self, you inevitably attract people who love the mask.
Which guarantees profound loneliness, even in a crowded room. Because you know they don't love you, they love the performance.
But when you broadcast your true frequency, you allow the right people to find you.
Okay, these stories are incredibly inspiring. They make you want to march into your boss's office, quit your job, drop all your fake friends, and march off into the wilderness to find your true dharmic tribe.
I mean, they do have that effect.
But, and this is a massive but, there is a dangerous trap here. Theories always sound perfect in a vacuum, especially when we are the heroes of our own narratives. It is time to play devil's advocate, because the source material does not let this philosophy off the hook. We need to look at the deep tensions and counterarguments to this whole worldview.
This is a critical pivot. We have to steel-man these counterarguments.
Right.
We cannot just blindly accept the outsider as hero narrative without stress testing it objectively, because misapplying this philosophy can lead to devastating isolation.
Right. Let's dive into the first major tension. Narcissistic withdrawal versus true awakening. The argument here is that romanticizing your isolation can actually just be a very sophisticated, intellectualized ego defense mechanism.
A very common one, unfortunately.
People label everyone around them as unconscious or shallow or toxic to build a protective ivory tower of intellectual superiority. So my pushback here, on behalf of the listener, is this. Are we sometimes just intellectualizing our own arrogance? Are we just calling ourselves outsiders because we lack social skills and it's easier to say everyone else is dumb than it is to face the messy, unglamorous work of actual human relationships?
It is a highly prevalent trap, especially in modern spiritual and self-help communities. Critics of the lone wolf narrative argue exactly this point. Humans are hypersocial mammals. When an individual decides that society is simply too superficial to understand their profound, unique depths, they successfully insulate themselves from the vulnerability of rejection.
Because if everyone else is beneath you, they can't hurt you.
Yes, but it's a Pyrrhic victory.
Because you are safe, but you were completely miserably alone in your tower.
Exactly. You trade the risk of rejection for the absolute certainty of chronic loneliness, but you disguise that loneliness as spiritual enlightenment.
Wow.
True spiritual maturity, according to the deep analysis in the texts, does not demand total alienation from ordinary people. In fact, true maturity cultivates the capacity to love and connect with humanity precisely where it is, flaws and all.
Meaning you don't need every person you interact with at the grocery store or the post office to perfectly mirror your specific philosophical framework. You can just have a nice chat about the weather or help someone pick up dropped oranges without feeling existentially betrayed that they haven't read the same books as you.
That is the crux of it. If you can only connect with people who share your exact spiritual or intellectual vocabulary, you haven't found your dharmic tribe. You've just built a narcissistic echo chamber. You are still being ruled by the ego's need for uniform validation. You've just disguised it as a spiritual quest.
That is a phenomenal distinction. But even if someone genuinely achieves that maturity and isn't just hiding behind their ego, we're still ignoring a massive elephant in the room here.
The privilege aspect.
Which brings us to the second counter-argument,
Hmm?
the privilege of the dharmic community. The argument is that auditing your internal resonance and patiently waiting for this perfect, soul-aligned tribe is an artifact of immense socioeconomic privilege. Who actually has the time and resources to sit around auditing their spiritual resonance?
We must unequivocally acknowledge that this is a framework rooted in privilege. The luxury of choosing your community based on philosophical resonance requires a significant baseline of material security.
Right.
For billions of people globally, community is not a spiritual curation project. It is dictated by brutal survival, by geography, and by economic necessity.
If you are a single parent working dual shifts at a meatpacking plant, or you are a newly arrived immigrant isolated by language barriers and systemic hurdles, you don't have the luxury of taking an energy audit of your coworkers and deciding to socially withdraw because their conversation doesn't fulfill your soul's purpose.
Not at all.
Your community is whoever can help you watch your kids on a Tuesday when your shift changes, or whoever can help you fix your car so you don't lose your job.
Precisely. To frame belonging purely as an internal spiritual quest blatantly ignores the harsh material realities of systemic isolation, poverty, and institutional marginalization. For many people, the feeling of being an outsider isn't an invitation to a higher dharmic purpose. It is a grinding, exhausting consequence of structural inequality and prejudice.
We have to be incredibly careful not to spiritualize systemic poverty or marginalization.
Right.
We cannot look at someone who has been pushed to the fringes of society by economic forces or racism and tell them, oh, your isolation is just a beautiful incubation chamber for your soul. That is incredibly dismissive and cruel.
It is, and an objective reading of this philosophy must hold both truths simultaneously. Yes, for those with the agency, the financial stability, and the privilege to shift their social architecture, it is a profound spiritual journey. But we must ethically acknowledge that this agency is not equally distributed across humanity. We cannot use spiritual philosophy to bypass social responsibility.
That naturally leads to the final major tension, which challenges the very foundation of this entire deep dive, the myth of the fixed true self.
The most philosophical counterargument of the three.
Yeah, because the whole premise of finding your true tribe assumes that you have a static pre-existing true self hidden deep inside you, like a magnificent marble statue buried in the sand, just waiting to be excavated and perfectly matched with the right group of people. But narrative identity theory and postmodern philosophy completely reject this idea.
They do, and with compelling evidence. Modern psychological frameworks suggest that the self is not a fixed monument waiting to be uncorked. It is an ongoing, fluid, deeply messy creation.
We are constantly being built.
Exactly. It is forged dynamically through relationship, through friction, through arguments, and through engagement with the world. You do not discover yourself in a vacuum. You build yourself in relation to others.
So if you isolate yourself, waiting around for a ready-made community that perfectly matches your idealized, untested inner identity, you're going to be waiting forever. You risk perpetual paralysis because that perfect community doesn't exist.
Real belonging is rarely, if ever, found ready-made. It is painstakingly constructed over years. It requires massive compromise, shared struggle, forgiveness, and mutual investment in deeply imperfect relationships.
It's messy.
Very messy. If you run away to the margins, the second a relationship causes friction because you decide it's lowering your vibration, you rob yourself of the very forge in which your identity is actually shaped. You need the heat of human friction to mature.
So, synthesizing these heavy debates, if the true self is forged in the friction of relationships, but our current relationships are deeply draining us and causing that soul-level sickness we discussed earlier, how exactly do we navigate the space between? How do we balance the need for solitude with the need for friction?
It's a delicate balance.
Let's revisit the concept of the margin. Because despite the very real traps of narcissism and privilege we just explored, history, philosophy, and psychology repeatedly show that transformative breakthroughs almost always come from the outside.
They do, and philosophers refer to this dynamic as an epistemological advantage. Now, setting aside the academic jargon, all that means is that your position on the outside gives you a clearer, more objective view of the truth than the people trapped on the inside.
The sources use a fantastic analogy here which perfectly illustrates this mechanism. Think of a fishbowl.
I love this analogy.
Right. If you are a fish happily swimming inside the cultural fishbowl, You don't know what water is. You are too thoroughly immersed in it. The water is just reality. Standing slightly outside the fishbowl is the only physical way to actually perceive the water, to see its boundaries, and to notice if it's getting dirty.
That is the core objective advantage of the outsider. From the margin, you can spot the systemic flaws, the obsolete traditions, and the unexamined dogmas that the insiders, the people comfortably swimming in the center of the bowl, aggressively agreeing with each other to maintain their status, are completely blind to. Real innovation and deep purpose are rarely forged in the noisy center of the crowd.
It's hammered out in the quiet workshops of introspection. But let's bring those earlier tensions back into the mix. We just established that human friction, the abrasive rubbing together of egos, is the catalyst for transformation. So how much solitude is too much? Can you achieve that deep maturity in complete permanent isolation?
The consensus across the sources is no. Solitude provides the unbroken container for deep creative and spiritual work. It allows the superficial desires implanted by society to burn away. But it must be treated as a phase, a crucible, not a permanent residence.
It's not a destination.
Exactly. The friction of eventually returning to society, of sharing your insights with imperfect people, is what actually tests the alloy you forged in isolation. If your enlightenment shatters the moment someone cuts you off in traffic, it wasn't real enlightenment.
That's a great point. And what about the human duty to remain connected to the communities we outgrow? Let's say you go through this profound awakening, you endure the crucible of solitude, and you realize your corporate job or your biological family operates on a completely different, perhaps toxic, frequency. Do you just abandon them entirely?
The mature approach suggests a more nuanced path. You recognize that you have an ethical duty to your shared humanity. You don't have to rely on your hometown or your old friends for your deep spiritual validation anymore, but you can still offer them your compassion, your support, and your grounded presence.
So you can be there without needing them to fix you.
Yes, you engage without expecting them to be your entire dharmic ecosystem. You can love them without needing them to understand you perfectly.
Okay, this shifts our conversation toward the most important part of this deep dive, actionable application. We've covered a massive amount of ground today, from evolutionary biology and fMRI scans to the ego versus the soul, the privilege of isolation, and the fishbowl analogy. How does the listener actually apply this incredibly complex matrix of ideas to their life on a Tuesday morning?
The texts provide a very clear roadmap, and the first actionable framework is conducting what they call an energy and resonance audit.
Explain the mechanics of this audit. How do we actually do it?
It requires a deliberate, systematic inventory of your energy exchanges. Once a month, you sit down and review your social and professional environments. You ask yourself highly targeted questions. When I am in this specific office or this friend group, does it require constant self-censorship to maintain the peace?
Am I wearing the borrowed clothes?
Yeah. Exactly. Does the conversation dwell exclusively in the shallow waters of complaint, gossip, and status signaling? Or does it invite depth, vulnerability, and intellectual curiosity?
And most importantly, does spending time in this space leave your spirit depleted or vitalized? I like to think about this like an app draining your phone's battery in the background. Stop treating massive energy drain as just an inevitable tax of living as an adult.
It's not a tax.
No. If your phone is completely dead by noon, you don't just accept it. You check the battery settings to see which app is secretly draining it. We need to treat our social exhaustion as valuable, actionable data. It is telling you exactly where your current life misaligns with your internal values.
That data is crucial, but what you actually do with that data is where most people make a catastrophic mistake. Which brings us to the second step, separating adaptation from assimilation.
This is the critical distinction that keeps you from getting fired or, needlessly alienating your entire family during the holidays.
Exactly. When people do this energy audit and realize an environment is deeply draining them, the immature, ego-driven reaction is to scorch the earth. To announce loudly, you are all toxic, you are lowering my vibration, I am leaving.
Dramatic exit.
Right. But true, mature adaptation means learning the art of professional and social grace without sacrificing your core integrity.
You don't have to burn bridges with everyone who disagrees with you. You can maintain polite, functional relationships. You can still go to the Monday morning meeting, you can still attend the family Thanksgiving dinner, but, and this is the absolute key, you quietly withdraw your emotional investment from those spaces.
You unplug from the matrix of their validation.
Yes, you stop expecting a space that requires censorship to fulfill your soul.
You adapt to the environment functionally. You smile, you pass the potatoes, you file the report, but you refuse to assimilate your core identity into it. You stop needing their validation.
Which naturally creates a vacuum, leading to the third step, redefining solitude as an incubation chamber. When you withdraw that heavy emotional investment from the wrong rooms, you're going to experience a gap. You will feel isolated.
And when that isolation strikes, the immediate biological urge we discussed at the very beginning will kick in with a vengeance.
The amygdala panic.
Yes, your amygdala will panic. You will feel an intense urge to numb the discomfort. You will reach for endless digital consumption, or you will frantically stuff your social calendar with shallow events just to feel something, to feel seen.
The text urges us to violently resist that numbing urge. Sit with the agonizing silence. Ask yourself, what is this friction trying to teach me about what I am finally ready to outgrow?
It is entirely about reframing the pain of loneliness. You are not a pariah. You are in the heat of incubation. You are in the cocoon. It is dark, it is uncomfortable, and it feels like you are dissolving, but it is biologically and spiritually necessary for the transformation.
And finally, that brings us to the fourth step. Broadcast your true frequency. Once you have survived the incubation, this is how you actually find the people who belong in your life.
You have to stop hiding your authentic interests, your weird quirks, and your deeper philosophies out of a feel of social rejection. We go back to the artist's case study. When you mask your true self to fit in, you inevitably attract people who love the mask.
Guaranteeing profound loneliness even when you are surrounded by people.
But when you show up authentically, without apologies, two incredible things happen simultaneously. First, you repel the wrong rooms very quickly, which saves you immense amounts of wasted energy.
The trash takes itself out.
Essentially, yes. And second, you magnetize the right rooms, the right people with surgical precision. By being relentlessly yourself, you become a lighthouse for the people looking for exactly what you have to offer.
So let's pull all of this together. Let's synthesize the massive journey we've just been on. We started in the ancient savannah, uncovering an amygdala that panics at the slightest hint of a missed party invite because it thinks you are going to be eaten by a lion.
A literal survival mechanism.
Right. We explored the ego's desperate, exhausting need for the safety of the center and the soul's quiet, persistent demand for the truth of the margin. We looked closely at the very real dangers of narcissistic withdrawal, and we acknowledged the socioeconomic privilege required to even entertain this framework.
A vital reality check.
But ultimately, we arrived at a powerful, liberating realization. The margin, the outside, is not a place of failure. It is a place of objective power, deep incubation, and ultimate authenticity.
It requires immense quiet courage to endure the biological panic of stepping out of the center and into the wilderness. But it is the only way to chart a course toward spaces where you are not merely tolerated, but deeply and profoundly understood.
As we wrap up this deep dive, there's a final provocative thought from the sources that builds beautifully on everything we've discussed today. Something for you to mull over as you navigate your own spaces this week.
We spend so much of our lives desperately searching for our true tribe so that we can finally feel safe and understood. But what if the ultimate purpose of embracing your outsider status isn't just to find your people? What if the true dharmic purpose of enduring that crucible of isolation is to become the strong, unwavering anchor for someone else? Someone who's currently wandering the margins, exhausted, wearing borrowed clothes, and desperately waiting for permission to take them off.
Think about that the next time you're standing in a crowded room, holding a drink, smiling at the right times, but feeling that low-grade hum of total alienation. You aren't a ghost. You are just an anchor waiting to be dropped. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep auditing your energy, and we will catch you next time.